that? Have you seen that
Oh,
guy? I don't.
yeah.
What is up with that,
Okay.
Astrid? There's a guy who like is a public YouTube celebrity guy. He's like some kind of yoga expert, and he's like drinking his friend's semen or something for gains.
Oh,
I'm not even
okay.
joking. It's crazy. Look it up after this. Google it. It's insane. So
Okay.
just to be clear, this is vanilla whey protein.
It really comes down to what works for you and how better you can adhere to it. And welcome again to a new Agile Life with Astrid, your APD. And today I've got Mike Israetel with us. And we're talking about underrated rapid Q&A that is going to be about nutrition, training for strength, recovery, and body composition. So it is going to be really, really cool. I've got a blog about nutrition and a blog on training. So let's get him right on.
I'm very excited to have you on.
Oh, well, thank you so much. I hope I don't disappoint.
You never disappoint.
Oh, I don't know about that.
Okay, Mike, this is our second round, but this one is going to be a little bit more rapid Q&A. And basically the rules of the game is that I'll ask you, or I kind of talk about a statement that might be just saying this is good for X or Y, Z. And you might just say this is overrated or underrated, and you just let me know in a few words why, or like explain your rationale of why you're saying that is underrated or overrated.
Okay. Fair warning, I'm very bad at this game, but I'll try my
And
best.
that's all right. If it's something that you think you can twist it around as well, that's fine.
Sure.
Okay, so we'll start with nutrition. And the first one would be, is protein distribution and protein timing good for recovery? Is that underrated or overrated?
Probably overrated by many people because carbohydrate distribution and total amount is more important for recovery. Protein is not as important. Protein is more important for adaptation. So I think that's mostly overrated, but it's nonetheless, some people underrate it and they eat one meal a day, and that's a bad idea. So I think eating 3 to 6 meals a day, evenly spaced of protein is good.
Okay. Carb cycling for strength, over or underrated?
Overrated. There's no such thing as carb cycling. If there is, it's arbitrary. Carbs should be paired to real world demands, activity, recovery, sleep, so on and so forth, training, and a cyclical pattern emerges, but the cyclicity is not intentional. So, if you go on dates with your significant other every Friday and Saturday because you're busy during the week, you don't call that cyclical dating. You just date when you're free. So when you eat carbs when you train and after training and don't eat a whole lot before you go to sleep, that's not carb cycling. That's just eating more carbs on the days you're very active and on the days you're not.
Perfect. Pre-workout for performance and strength.
Appropriately rated on average. I think some people are skeptical. Some people really love it. I think it works very well, but you have to use it intelligently and periodize your use of it so that you only use it when you really need it. I think some people are using it for a deload shoulder and bicep workout. That's a bit strange. Some people are they don't go to the gym unless they get pre-workout, and other people don't use it at all and end up missing on some really good benefits potentially.
With that said, what about creatine supplementation for recovery as post-workout?
Creatine has very few effects on recovery. The understanding creatine's link to recovery is usually misconstrued. Creatine helps repetition to repetition recovery, and it helps set to set recovery. So if you do a set and then you do one precisely 1 minute later, if you're on creatine, you get a few more reps. Days later, creatine has very, very limited effect on recovery. And I think, especially the way you phrase the question post-workout, creatine is perhaps very, very small marginally better to take post-workout, but the timing is such a small factor that if you just take 1 gram more of creatine per day, fill the scoop a little more, you can take it any time and it has roughly the same effect.
Okay, so it would be overrated for those who use it as a post-workout?
I would think so, yeah.
When we look at refeeds for body composition changes, is that overrated or underrated?
Very overrated. Refeeds have limited use that is real and a small use primarily for psychology and for sustainability of dieting. But you can get a lot of effect with no refeeds at all and just doing shorter diets with longer maintenance phases in between. I would point to the work of Menno Henselmans and Jackson Pios as two folks that are very vocal about the limitations of refeeds. So that's a good place to look.
Hypercaloric diet for hypertrophy and muscle gain.
Recently, with some of the things people have been saying about gaintaining, I would say underrated. You can't get 240 pounds big without eating 240 pounds big. And if you start at 160 pounds, there's actually no physical way in which you can gain that much size without being hypercaloric. Now, if you're 160 pounds and not so lean and you want to get 160 pounds and lean, you can do it without hypercaloric phases entirely. I wouldn't say it's the most efficient way, but it's certainly a way. But if you want to get much more jacked, you're going to have to eat a hypercaloric diet. There is no way in our modern understanding of physics that it could be in any other way, unless you violate mass energy equivalency, which would be a hell of a... Then you could just do cool shit that doesn't have to do with bodybuilding, like be Captain Planet. And that's what I would do. But anyway.
What about, this is within the same question, what would be the ratio when it comes to like training and the load are you using as a main driver for hypertrophy and the nutritional component? So what would be like the ratio, say, what is more important between these two, training and the surplus, or is it the surplus as important as the training component?
I'll give you a slightly more technical answer if that's okay. Training is more foundational. So if you train hard, the details of how you train are minorly important to your body composition. If you diet in an organized manner, the details of your diet can really, really impact your results. So dieting is less important than training, but the variations of dieting are much more important than the variations of training.
Okay.
I hope you enjoyed these episodes, and make sure you subscribe to my channel and hit the bell button so I can provide you with more information every time I upload a video. So stay tuned and keep watching. Thank you so much.
Sleep quality and sleep quantity for hypertrophy and performance, is that overrated or underrated?
Sleep quality is probably underrated. A lot of people say I got 8 hours of sleep and they don't really bother to figure out what kind of sleep it was. Sleep quantity is, I think, appropriately rated. Most people aren't joking themselves, and most people know, I don't get enough sleep. And they know it's bad. I would say that the practice of actually implementing more sleep is underrated or underutilized because most people don't do it. So most people say, shit, I should be sleeping more, and they kind of shrug it off. Yeah, so that would be my answers for that.
Okay. What about maintenance phase for like really maintaining, doing certain maintenance phases in a mesocycle or a macrocycle? Is that overrated or underrated?
It highly depends. This is why I'm bad at this game. It highly depends on the population we're specifying. But I think,
that's okay.
I think generally it's underrated. Maintenance phases have great advantages. Some people still manage to overrate them though, and think that maintenance phases are these magical things. You want to maintain only for as little time as possible. The real work gets done not in maintenance. The real work gets done in fat loss phase and a hypertrophy phase, gaining and losing. But maintenance phases should be as long as needed, and I think that's probably my best answer for that.
Okay. What about reverse dieting?
Geez. So if we caricature it in its worst possible position, it's vastly overrated because there's really no such thing. Like you can do such a thing, is decrease the magnitude of your deficit for 4 weeks before you leave your deficit altogether at the end of a fat loss phase. That's a very bad idea. Analogy is, if you are in a room in which the couch is on fire and you're lying on the floor, a meter away from the couch, if the firefighters show up, they pull you out of the room. They pull you out of the deficit. They don't tell you to slide half a meter over so that the couch isn't burning you as bad. That's insane. It's still burning you, just not as bad. So the deficit is still doing all its terrible things to just like diet psychology and all this other stuff. And at the end of the day, when the diet is over, the diet is over. If you caricature reverse dieting as intelligently returning to a maintenance and then slowly increasing activity and consumption as your maintenance calories rise, that's a very good idea, and that's probably very underrated. But the overrated is the magical where you reduce your deficit by some arbitrary amount and stay in a deficit long term. That's a bad idea.
So you're more prone for or advocate for recovery diets?
Yeah, you could say that.
Like when we talk about, yeah.
Yeah. Once your
Okay.
fat loss diet is over, it's over, and you return to your best assumption of maintenance. Now, your best assumption of maintenance is going to increase in calories over time, and that is that's a very good thing. You should attend to that, and that's what we could call a recovery diet or something like that. A reverse diet it used to have at least another connotation back when Lane used to popularize it years ago, and he's since come around and said that that's maybe not ever what he meant. Or what he means now is like go to maintenance, but then slowly return the calories and increase maintenance, then that's a really great idea.
Okay, perfect. Now, protein quality and leucine content for hypertrophy.
The shake is actually pure leucine. That's why it's white. I'm just kidding.
Awesome.
It's pure semen. I've actually began to drink of the semen of other men. Have you seen that? Have you seen that guy? I don't.
Yeah.
What is up with
Okay.
that, Astrid? There's a guy who like is a public YouTube celebrity guy. He's like some kind of yoga expert, and he's like drinking his friend's semen or something for gains.
Oh.
I'm not even
Okay.
joking. It's crazy. Look it up after this. Google it. It's insane. So
Okay.
just to be clear, this is vanilla whey protein. So I tell myself. I think it's overrated. I would like to see more data on exactly how impactful the leucine threshold really is. Some of the data is pretty good, but it is what I would call like sort of more exploratory data than confirmatory data. I think we need much more science to show us how little hypertrophy you can get if the leucine threshold isn't quite met or something like that. However, I think trying to get the highest quality proteins possible is good. I will say that the vast majority of protein studies where they are feeding people a certain amount of protein, and they conclude, or from surveys, they say, okay, 1 gram of protein per pound of body weight is really optimal. Most of that data is collected on mixed protein sources, only a fraction of which are very high quality. So there's got to be a realization there that not all of the proteins have to be super high quality. I think some people will say like, oh, I ate oatmeal and bread and bananas and this and that, and is that all that protein just junk? No, some of it can be put to good use. I usually go by a really easy formula. I'll expound on it in a later YouTube video. It's coming in at some point. Maybe something like, you count half of that protein for protein and count half of it for carbs when it's poor quality. Because a lot of it actually does get deaminated and used for basically carbohydrate-like purposes. But the other aminos actually do get into fractional muscle synthesis and all that other good stuff. So it's a bit of a mixed bag. And I think on average, people tend to worry about it a ton, where it's like, look, if you're eating some high quality sources and you're eating few low quality sources, that's totally fine.
So would you say that the most important thing is hitting your total protein target versus like the actual like minutiae and like the type of protein and things like
Totally.
that?
Absolutely.
Okay. And in that question, would you say that when someone tracks their protein, would you consider tracking the protein coming from like plant sources or your salads or your burritos or things like that? I don't know, carbohydrates type protein coming from there.
Depends on how you're tracking it. A lot of times you don't have a choice. Most tracking apps just port all the protein in as a 1-to-1 equivalency. So if you eat whatever gram of protein from broccoli, counts as a gram in your app. If you are an individual who tracks food yourself and just writes down your food, I would track that protein as half protein and half carbohydrate. I think that's probably the most intelligent thing. But if you have an app, you don't really have a choice. But insofar as you track all of the protein, make sure that the majority of it is at least 50%, any more is better, is protein from high quality sources. So what we don't like to see is like, I had a meal of peanut butter and bread and a banana, and I got 15 grams of protein. Like, did you though? Maybe you got something like 7. So I think a situation of making sure to have high quality protein sources first, and then it's a very small problem. If you're trying to wiggle around high quality protein sources, you may start to have to count a lot of stuff that doesn't add up to much.
Now, the other question is about ketogenic diet, especially for using the ketogenic diet for a big week in contest prep. Is that overrated or underrated?
Overrated. I think when people drop their carbohydrates profoundly low before a contest, a lot of what happens is, yes, you get a really good glycogen rebound afterwards. Most people don't consume enough carbs to even take advantage of that. Also, if you're hypocaloric and dieting for months and months, you're just about as glycogen sensitive as you will ever be. And there's really, not much you can do to help that situation. It's already maximum. And in addition to that, it causes a lot of fatigue and a lot of water compartment shifting that is kind of gets complicated. So I think especially for folks that are natural and don't have some of the levers to pull, that are diuretics and things like that, I think they probably have to be a little bit more restrained. And maybe if they're successful with very low carbs at the beginning of a week of prep week, that's fine. But if they have had some troubles in the past, there's definitely not some law that says like, oh, look, if you don't do zero carbs for a few days before you fill out, you're just not going to be able to fill out. That's almost certainly not true.
Okay. Nutrition periodization for fat loss. Is that overrated or underrated?
Probably underrated. Most people don't even know what that is, and most people are not successful in the long term. And a lot of that is because they're not taking adequate maintenance phases. They're not ratcheting down their intake. They just drop it down one time. They burn out. So I think if more people just at least understood the fundamental concepts of nutritional periodization and applied them very simply, they would benefit greatly.
Number of meals per day for performance.
For performance is overrated, probably.
Okay.
Unless you have multiple daily training sessions, and then the number of meals per day is probably underrated.
Okay. Protein consumption for satiety. Is that overrated or underrated?
I think it's appropriately rated. I think people know that protein is good for satiety, but I think most people have figured out that past a certain level, protein doesn't do a whole lot for satiety. It's also very expensive. I will turn this question around a little bit and sort of rephrase something Mena Henselmus has been big on. Vegetables are very underrated for satiety compared to protein. People say protein for satiety, and they're right. But vegetables are way better for satiety than protein. And a lot of people are like, oh, well, yeah, I guess. And they're sort of in the back of their minds. So when people ask for satiety tips, a lot of things, a lot of first things people say is eat more protein, because they think they have this one weird trick. But very few people say eat more veggies. That's something they say maybe second or third place. Protein is first, but it's something they should be saying is the first possible thing they could say.
Would you say that like people who don't like much vegetables, having a fiber supplement would do the thing?
That don't like vegetables?
Yeah, or don't consume as much vegetables. Let's say someone hates eating vegetables. Would having a fiber supplement do the same?
No. It would have almost no effect whatsoever on satiety, because the way vegetables increase satiety is mostly by the amount of volume they take up in your GI tract, and fiber supplements take almost none. And I will also say that if you really don't like vegetables, but you're really hungry, just get hungrier, and then you'll start to be able to eat vegetables. I ate a bunch of vegetables towards the end of cuts that I normally would never touch because I hate them. Towards the end of cuts, they start to look pretty decent, and then it allows you to not enjoy your food so much. Eating is more like a chore. And then because eating is a chore, the kind of psychopathology associated with like eating as almost addictive like behaviors towards eating towards the end of a prep or something tends to really go away. And you're like, man, it's just like food's just like regular food. I'm not super excited about eating it. And then it works out to your advantage. So people say, I really don't like vegetables. My response to them, a little bit sarcastically, is, well, you must just not be hungry enough. As if they get hungry enough, then they start to eat vegetables, and then it's like, oh, it's a self-solving problem.
I agree. That's so good. Glycemic index for performance and hypertrophy. Is that overrated or underrated?
Probably overrated, but not by much. I think most people kind of know the glycemic index isn't a big deal. Some people like to pretend it's not a deal at all, but those people are wrong. I think a lot of people have trouble thinking on the margins, that there's very absolutist kind of thinking a lot of the times. And, glycemic index can be very not powerful, but still a thing. It doesn't have to be not a thing at all. And it also doesn't have to be the greatest thing ever.
I agree. Now, water intake and hydration degree for fat loss.
Almost completely irrelevant, wildly overrated. People are obsessed with hydration, and in almost every case, it's almost completely no difference. There are some niche scenarios in which hydration really matters. Sport performance in very hot temperatures over the short term where you're not properly rehydrating gets you into trouble, and you'll notice a performance decrement. But the human body does a phenomenal job at hydrating you, and the mechanism by which fat loss is bolstered by euhydration is wildly unclear, if at all extant. And if you are dehydrated chronically, you'll probably know about it. All your body processes suffer a little bit if you're really dehydrated, but if the body processes are suffering notably, you will know about it. You'll be very thirsty. So, well, that's the deal.
Okay. The last one in nutrition, casein powder for hunger management.
Not impressive. Not impressive because it's a powder and it's easily eaten or it's easily drank in a shake. Then it has very little effect on hunger. I will say casein pudding, if you make it into a pudding, can be a very good anti-hunger tool just because it's very difficult to get down and it's just not that good. I was actually been massing for like 10 weeks now. And in my first week of massing, I was like, I'm going to have casein every night. And I still have, but now I drink it. But what I did was when I first started massing, I was rebounding off a cut and I was really hungry. And the first thing I did was like the first 2 weeks I did casein at night. And like the 8th day or whatever, the first day of the second week, I tried casein at night. I took 1 spoonful and I was like, ah, I just couldn't do it. And so I stopped. I just went straight to fluids. So casein pudding is gnarly. Another sort of pro tip here is buy a whole bunch of baby carrots, dip them into casein pudding. Don't do this if you're massing because you'll think I'm just fucking with you. This is the worst snack ever. Don't do it when you're maintaining. You're wasting your life. But if you are fat loss dieting, you're really hungry, you're so hungry you have trouble sleeping, that little nighttime snack can put you out and you get sick of eating it. Halfway through, you'll be like, the hell am I doing with my life? Very low calorie. Delicious if you're cutting hard enough. So that's my advice.
Okay.
Thank you so much for being watching. I appreciate you so much. I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you have any questions or any comments, please comment below and I'll be sure I'll answer to this as soon as I can.